we will see in 4th chapter that the same shloka has the seed thought for chapter 4. And that is, having abandoned attachment and having become balanced in success and failure. So the first line is, established in yoga, perform action. That is the seed thought for 3rd chapter, which we covered. And in the second line is the seed thought for 4th chapter, which is non-attachment. How non-attachment plays a very important role in growth in higher states of consciousness. So this is dealt with in great detail and very beautifully explained, and it will clear all the doubts about everything. So in chapter 2, we learned that life has 2 aspects. One is never-changing absolute, and the other is ever-changing relative. And to be fulfilled in life, we need knowledge of both of them, absolute and relative. So that's what we learned in 2nd chapter. In 3rd chapter, we learned the role of action in making this experience of absolute. So 2nd chapter, we learn how to get to the absolute, the inner silence. And in the 3rd chapter, we have learned what role action plays. So that was karma yoga. Now, when this experience of absolute becomes permanent, self-awareness is maintained in waking, dreaming, and sleep states. And one experiences oneself as separate from activity. Then one begins to wonder if this is the reality of life or this is an escape from life. So this question is answered in chapter 4. And we are going to learn about the nature of action and the nature of actor. So we know the nature of actor is bliss consciousness, transcendental. But then we are acting. So we are actor and doing action. So what is the nature of action? So we learn about that both on individual level as well as on cosmic level. Then comes the understanding that action and actor are independent of one another. They're separate from each other. And that is the state of non-attachment. And the Sanskrit word for that is sannyasa. It's called renunciation in English. And this non-attachment is the basis of freedom for the actor. That is when we do actions on one hand, and then on the other hand, it gives us success in life. How action can be successful. So this is what is dealt with. We learn about transcending, silence, then we come out and we are acting, and then we maintain that silence, and yet we are separate from the self. And this is the key to success in life. We are established in silence even when we are acting in the world. And ignorance of this knowledge of non-attachment is the cause of suffering. So to bring out this knowledge of wisdom, Shri Krishna Bhagavan begins with the tradition of yoga. And then this begins in the first shloka of chapter 4. It says, Imam vivasvate yogam proktavanaham avyayam. So here the word imperishable yoga is used. The Sanskrit word is avyayam. That means imperishable. So Krishna Bhagavan is saying that this yoga is imperishable. There is no decline, no destruction of that. It is not at all perishable. It is so because it gives us the knowledge of absolute and relative. Both are eternal. Both are always there. That's what makes it permanent, eternal. And so is yoga, because absolute is eternal and permanent. And it is the yoga of that knowledge. So this yoga becomes eternal. As opposed to this, the knowledge we get by going to school and college, it gives us only the knowledge of relative. We are not studying the absolute. So the knowledge we get from books and library, going to college, it is not eternal because it only deals with the relative. So in this shloka, Krishna Bhagavan first says that he first gave it to Vivasvat. And this he did at the beginning of creation itself. He gave it to Kshatriyas. Vivasvat was a Kshatriya, so that they can have strength to protect their country and maintain law and order. It's interesting to note that Krishna Bhagavan did not give it to Brahmanas, usually because they are the Brahmanas, they maintain the Vedas and knowledge and everything. But he didn't give it to them first, but he gave it to the Kshatriyas, who are warriors. And the reason we will see in just a minute. Vivasvat gave it to his son, Manu. Manu is the lawgiver to the world. This Manu, Vivasvat's son, is the seventh Manu. And because he is the son of Vivasvat, he is called as Vaivasvata Manu. So that's why we call it Vaivasvata Manvantara. You probably, some of you have heard, when we do pujas and anushtanas, they say Vaivasvata Manvantara. And this Vaivasvata Manu, he is said to be the progenitor of the present human race. And so Manu gave it to his son Ikshvaku. And this king, he ruled at Ayodhya, which is the birthplace of Sri Rama, as the king of the Solar dynasty. So Ikshvaku was the king of Solar dynasty. Then the Indian conception of history and time were explained. History has a purpose in that we learn from the history. And we will get to the value of history in a second. But first, let us try to understand the concept of time. Time is conception to measure eternity. And the best measure will be the lifespan of something that has the greatest longevity in the relative field of creation. Because when you go to absolute, you are beyond time and space. You cannot measure anything there. So we can only measure in relative. So this longevity is measured in relative. This, according to the enlightened vision of Vyasa, is Divine Mother, the Universal Mother, who is ultimately responsible for all that is, that was, and that will be, past, present, and future, in the entire cosmos. We call it Gamba. So Maharishi explained all this in one short paragraph. One day of is called as one kalpa is equal to the time of 14 Manus. The time of one Manu is called as Manvantara. One Manvantara equals 71 Chatur. One Chaturyugi means 4 Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. And we are in Kali Yuga, as you all know. Kali Yuga equals 432,000 years of man's life. So now, the question comes, how can anyone possibly read such history and learn from it? It is so long, so many hundreds of thousands of years. It's impossible to write history and to study that. That is why chronological order was not maintained in Indian history. Like in modern history, they write, chronological events, but we cannot do that. Therefore, some people dismiss Mahabharata and other scriptures as myths, but they should, on the contrary, understand Bhagavad Gita, that it forms the central core of the most authentic record of Indian history and of the highest civilization that has ever existed on earth. Bhagavad Gita is in the central part of Mahabharata, very great epic. Why do we say that this knowledge in Bhagavad Gita is authentic record? Why should you believe anybody? Why should you take anybody's word for it? Because now, after billions of years of creation, the knowledge given in Bhagavad Gita had been scientifically validated. And there are more than 1,000 scientific studies conducted in several countries and replicated and published in many reputable journals. So in the beginning, if you heard me carefully, I said Shri Krishna Bhagavan gave this knowledge of imperishable yoga at the beginning of creation to the warriors. So that was at the beginning of creation. How many hundreds of thousands of billions of years ago? That knowledge now is being proven by science. So that's what makes it authentic. Because with science, we have to believe it. So, to satisfy Arjuna about the original source of this teaching, it is sufficient to give him the idea that this eternal wisdom was handed over from generation to generation. Then, moving on to the second shloka, which is Evam parampara praptam imam rajarishayo viduhu. Means the knowledge that was given to the Rajarshi, that is the kings, it was lost because of long lapse of time. That comes in the second line of the shloka. So Krishna Bhagavan says that this knowledge was given to the kings so they can fulfill their responsibilities properly. So what is the responsibility of the king? To make sure that his citizens are developing on all levels of life, physical, mental, and spiritual. Not just providing good food and clothing and some happiness like that. The spiritual knowledge has to be there also, because spiritual development is the basis of all other development, or all other aspects of the personality and everything. So the kings received the spiritual knowledge so that they can make sure that all their citizens get this knowledge. But it was lost because of long lapse of time. But in the first verse, we heard that yoga is imperishable, it cannot be destroyed, it cannot be lost. So it seems like there is some discrepancy on the surface. But the reason for that is because the purity of teaching was lost. Because it had been going on for so long from one generation to the other. So when the purity of teaching is lost, then you don't get the desired result. Just like if you take a medicine that is not pure, it will not cure the disease. Simple, it's like that. But the knowledge cannot be lost forever. And from time to time, great teachers come and revive it. And we are very fortunate to be born in this era where we are getting this precious knowledge from Maharishi ji. So this is what we have studied in the last session. Now we will move on to the next shloka, shloka 3. Ghanshyam ji, कृपया तीसरा श्लोक का पारायण करना. चौथा अध्याय, तीसरा श्लोक. Unmute, please. घनश्याम जी.
जी दीदी, जय गुरुदेव.
हाँ, पारायण कीजिए.
कौन सा दीदी श्लोक?
तीसरा श्लोका, तीसरा अध्याय, तीसरा श्लोका.
तीसरा अध्याय,
चतुर्थ अध्याय. हेमा जी, 4th chapter.
सॉरी, चतुर्थ अध्याय, तीसरा श्लोक.
जी दीदी. ओम सायेवायं मया तेद्य योगः प्रोक्ता पुरातनः भक्तोऽसि मे सखा चेति रहस्यं ह्येतदुत्तमम्. ओम.
Jai Gurudev. This same age-old yoga, which indeed the supreme secret, I have today declared to you because you are my devotee and friend. Age-old yoga indicates that the teaching has withstood the test of time and that it cannot but prove useful. Shri Krishna Bhawan is not trying out any new method. He is only restoring the old tradition. Such has been the declaration of all great masters from time immemorial. They never claimed that their teaching was new, but rather that they were bringing out forgotten wisdom of life. They spoke only of restoration because the truth of any useful principle continues to exist in time. Shri Krishna Bhagavan here mentions 2 qualities of Arjuna's which entitle him to receive this great secret wisdom, friend and devotee, and also 2 qualities of the system of yoga, supreme and secret. That which is secret can be passed on to a friend, but that which is supreme can be passed on only to a devotee. A devotee never questions his master. In order to allow Arjuna the freedom to question, Shri Krishna Bhagavan calls him his friend. Arjuna makes use of this freedom in the following verse. So, I continue with the main points here, and it is very simple and clear that the knowledge that we are talking about is the knowledge which is sometimes hidden for reasons that there may be abuse of knowledge, or it may be hidden because some people don't want to share knowledge. But in case here, it is very clear that Krishna Bhagavan wants to share this supreme knowledge because they know that Arjuna is a devotee, and a devotee never questions the master. So this supreme knowledge is passed on to the devotee, and also in chapter 3, verse 3, it is made clear that this knowledge goes to a friend. So Shri Krishna Bhagavan calls Arjuna his friend. And these two qualities of Arjuna, the quality of a devotee and the quality of friend, makes him stand in that position where the supreme and secret knowledge can be shared. Now, the scientific research on it says very beautifully that when you consider somebody as a devotee and a sacred friend, then through Maharishi Transcendental Meditation, it has been proven that you have now greater consideration for others, the growth of a more tactful and forgiving and agreeable nature, growth of a more sympathetic, helpful, and caring nature. There is increased tolerance and increased open mindedness with greater flexibility of construction of reality. And these things, these scientific researches are exactly what Shri Krishna Bhagavan is finding in Arjuna as a friend and as a devotee. Thank you, Jai Gurudev.
Any questions? Looks like no questions. So we'll move on. घनश्याम जी, चौथा अध्याय का चौथा श्लोक का पारायण करना.
जी दीदी. ओम अर्जुन वाच अपरं भवतो जन्म परं जन्म विवस्वतः कथमेतद्विजानीयाम् त्वमादौ प्रोक्तवानिति. Om.
Arjuna said, later was thy birth, and earlier the birth of Vivasvat. How am I to understand this saying that thou didn't proclaim it in the beginning? This question shows Arjuna's alertness to every word that Shri Krishna Bhagavan speaks to him, his vigilance and careful scrutiny of every point. Such is the mind of a good teacher, seeker of truth. A good master is only encouraged by such questions. In the previous word, Shri Krishna Bhagavan, through himself, has connected the far distant past with the present. Now, Arjuna isolates him in time and states his difficulty in understanding the eternity of time in him. Shri Krishna Bhagavan's answer is plain and simple. Before I go to the main point, if Sunita is not sharing the screen, may I request Himabundu to read both the verses? Thank you.
I am there, ma'am. I'm sharing the screen.
Oh, Srita, you're sharing this. So you read one and Nema reads the one. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. So now this point is again at verse 4 has a very simple point to say rightly what Arjuna feels, that sun god Vivasvat is there at the time of creation. So he is very confused in mind to know that how did Krishna Bhagwan give this knowledge to Vivasvat when Krishna Bhagwan came into this world later than Vivasvat. So this type of question arises, and this gives a great satisfaction and happiness to Shri Krishna Bhagwan that he's such an intelligent, such a wonderful uh, disciple or a student who answers and understands these type of questions. And now you will see later how Krishna Bhagwan gives him the answer to this question. And in the scientific research, it says, how am I to understand this saying that thou didn't proclaim it in the beginning? Individual practicing transcendental meditation displayed a significant increase in the field independence. Then what happens? They have a more intellectual performance and ability to deal with abstract and complexities. Increased field independence indicating broader comprehension, which you can see if you apply this to how Arjuna is questioning Shri Krishna Bhagwan. So, a greater comprehension and increased ability to focus attention, improved intellectual performance, and increased emotional stability and maturity. And in verse 4, we can see that level of maturity in Arjuna and increased mental clarity and wakefulness. This is very obvious in how Arjuna puts forward a question to Shri Krishna Bhagwan. Jai Gurudev.
Any questions? No? So pretty simple shlokas. So we'll move on to the next shloka. Ghanshyamji, Panchwa shlok, please.
Didi. ॐ श्रीभगवानुवाच बहूनि मे व्यतीतानि जन्मानि तव चार्जुन तान्यहं वेद सर्वाणि न त्वं वेद्य परं तप ॐ
Jai Gurudev. The blessed Lord said, many births have passed for me and for you also. O Arjuna, I know them all, but you know them not. O scorcher of enemies. This verse may be said to exemplify what verses 12 and 22 of the second chapter spoke of in principle. Bodies change in time, but time changes in the self, in being, which continues to be regardless of past, present, or future. As the embodied self remains unchanged when the body passes into the changing states of childhood, youth, and old age, so does the self continue unchanged in the eternity of time. Shri Krishna Bhagwan says, I know them all, but you know them not. This points to a difference between the life of man and the incarnation of God. Man is born as a result of his past actions, good and bad, so that his vision remains colored or obstructed by those influences. The nature of the divine incarnation is ever pure, eternal, unbounded intelligence. His vision is absolutely clear. That is why for him the eternity of knowing is maintained and the factor of time fails to obstruct it. The Lord's being is the playground of the time which he creates. It comes and goes, but he steadfast is his eternal being, forever and ever continues to be. He is the ocean of life, while time rises and falls as the tide on the surface of the ocean. Though the tidal waves draw on the depths, they can never fathom the unfathomable abysses. The life of man is like a wave which rises up to sea. It can see so far and no more. But Shri Krishna Bhagavan, stature is like that of an ocean on which the whole of space is reflected. Thus the Krishna Bhagavan knows them all and Arjuna knows them not. Arjuna had challenged Shri Krishna Bhagavan's words and the expression, "You know them not," shows that the Lord is obliged to use his authority. But at the same time, he addresses Arjuna as scorcher of enemies, so as to prevent his morale from sinking. Shri Krishna Bhagavan uses his authority with love. The next verse further explains the Lord's nature. Jai Gurudev.
Okay. So we have studied in chapter 2 the body and the indweller of the body. Dehinosmin yat dehe kaumaram yavvanam jara. The bodies change in time, but the underlying self continues to be in past, present, and future. You were a little girl, then you grow up to be a young woman, then in time you became an old woman. So the body is changing, but the person inside of you, you say, I am so and so. That I stays the same. That is not changing. And this continues unchanged in the eternity of time. That is why that I inside of us is eternal. And on the surface, the body is changing. So Krishna Bhagavan is saying, I know them, but you know them not. Why is that? Because humans have limited intelligence, but divine incarnation's intelligence is unlimited. It's easy to understand, isn't it? And by saying so, Krishna Bhagavan is saying with a great skill here. Now, if you just say like that, somebody's feelings can get hurt. So what he's saying, Arjuna, you are the scorcher of enemies. You are a strong man. So on one side, he's saying that you're a strong man, but at the same time pointing out in a very subtle way that because he is human, he's limited. That's what he's doing very nicely. So this is the technique of using authority with love. In English, we call it tough love. You're tough, but you're still loving. So can we have the scientific research, please, Sunita? this scientific research in this shloka, the phrase Tanyaham Veda Sarvan, this phrase is chosen. Krishna Bhagavan is saying, I know them all. That is taken into consideration. So, if you want to know something, your brain has to do some work. What is that work? It is thinking. So, some part of the brain is thinking when you want to know something. And if you want to know everything, then your whole brain must be working because you want to know everything. So this is what the study is showing. So with regular practice of meditation, one begins to use more and more of the unused hidden brain reserves. This is a very nice study. It's a known fact that generally people use only about 10% of the brain. Someone like Einstein, maybe, who is a genius, he was probably using 15% of his brain. That's all. And it's found that with regular practice of transcendental meditation, we begin to use more and more of brain capacity. We have a very nice brain, beautiful. It works very well. But we are only using some part of it. We are not using the whole of the brain. And with regular practice, we are beginning to expand that container and we begin to learn more. And there are several studies pointing to that fact. I'll give you an example which will help you to understand more about how we can expand and the value of expanding. Say you're playing piano. And if you play piano with one finger, then you're just making some noise. You are not making any music. But when you begin to use all 10 fingers, you make most beautiful music. See the difference? In using more fingers, you have more beautiful music. If you just use one, it's not even music. So it's like that. You know, the brain expands with regular practice of transcendental meditation. Okay, so any questions? Okay, so I guess we move on to the next shloka. Ghanshyamji, Chatwa shlok, please.
जी दीदी ॐ अजोऽपि सन्नप्यात्मा भूतानामीश्वरोऽपि सन् प्रकृतिं स्वामधिष्ठाय सम्भवाम्यात्ममायया ॐ
Jai Gurudev. Though I am unborn and of imperishable nature, though Lord of all beings, yet remaining in my own nature, I take birth through my own power of creation. At this point, there is an illustration of an important psychological technique. As Shri Krishna Bhagavan has earlier affirmed the authenticity of this system of yoga, declaring that it is ancient and has a great tradition. He must also make clear to Arjuna that he who is giving out this eternal wisdom is great in himself, is one whose word alone can be taken as authoritative. The direction of the discourse is such that it makes Arjuna question Sri Krishna Bhagavan on the very point about which he wants to speak next. Had Sri Krishna Bhagavan spoken the words of this and the preceding verse in a different context and not in reply to Arjuna's question, verse 4, then they would not have been so effective and convincing. It is the greatness of the teacher that brings out the right question from the pupil. In answering it, the teacher freely develops his own theme and at the same time keeps the interest of the pupil more actively engaged than it would be if only the teacher spoke. Although manifest creation, which includes men and other creatures, springs from the unmanifest, its manifestation is by virtue of Prakriti. But the divine manifestation of the unmanifest being, which comes to re-establish the forgotten wisdom of life, is by virtue of Leela Shakti, which is the very power of the Absolute, an integral part of its transcendent divine nature. Surgery is the inseparable power of the surgeon. Sometimes it is active, as when the surgeon works at the operating table, but at other times it is latent, as when he is resting at home. Leela Shakti, the play power of Brahman, functions in an analogous way, and by virtue of this, the unmanifest, ever remaining in its absolute state, manifests into creation. The almighty nature of the eternal being thus maintains reality in both its aspects, absolute and relative. Shri Krishna Bhagavan says, remaining in my own nature, I take birth. Just as the sap in a tree appears as a leaf and a flower without losing its quality as sap, so the unmanifest being, remaining unmanifest, imperishable, and eternal, takes birth. Nothing happens to the Absolute, and yet the incarnation of the Absolute springs up by virtue of its own nature. Here, Sri Krishna Bhagavan is saying, while remaining in my own nature, I take birth through my power of Krishna. That is how I remain unbound and at the same time able to restore law and order in creation. This principle,
Any problem, Bindu?
Anyway, Sunita, it's the last line. Just finish it off for her.
The principle is developed in the following verse.
Right. The Hemaji can continue.
Okay. So, this verse tells us about how Sri Krishna Bhagavan takes birth. Means incarnation. It is different from the birth the human beings take. So it's avatara. How it takes place, Krishna Bhagavan is telling us that it is through his quote, my own power of creation, end of quote. And what is that power of creation? It is Leela Shakti. That is the play power of Brahman. So let's see what is the difference between manifest creation and avatar. So the manifest creation, which includes all human beings and other creatures, etc., it comes from the unmanifest and it is by virtue of Prakriti, nature. But incarnation, that is avatara, which comes to re-establish law and order is by virtue of Leela Shakti, the play power of Brahman. This way, the unmanifest, ever remaining in absolute state, manifests into creation. So, how do we understand this Leela Shakti? Maharishi gave us a nice example of surgeon. When he is at work, he is operating. He's using his surgical skills. But when he's at home, that skill is latent. It is not in action. It's just there, but it's not in action. So Leela Shakti functions in the same way. It is in Brahman, but it is silent. So Ishvara, who is the Lord of all beings, remaining in his own nature, he takes birth through his power of creation. That is Mother Divine, Shakti. And through that, he maintains reality in both absolute and the relative phases of life. And that is how he remains unbound, because he stays in the absolute reality, even while restoring law and order in creation. So now we can have the scientific research slide, please. In this scientific study, the word avyayatma is taken into consideration. Atma, that is avyaya, that means which is imperishable. And at the same time, it is transcendental. It is imperishable because it is transcendental. Transcendental means you cannot see it, you cannot touch it, you cannot hear it. And in our meditation, when we go beyond thought and we transcend, we experience Atma. And this is a state of restful alertness. We all have that experience. We are very rested, at the same time we are alert. And this, as opposed to the situation in sleep, where you are resting, but you're not awake. Your consciousness is knocked off. So in transcendental consciousness, we are totally restful, and then you don't need so much oxygen. When you're running, you need a lot more oxygen. But when you're sitting, you need less. And when you're transcending, you go into deep rest, you need even less. Sometimes so much so that your breath almost comes to a standstill. Your breath is suspended. Many people have that experience. That is a sign of samadhi. And at the same time, there is higher EEG coherence. The brain waves are more coherent. And this indicates a state of pure consciousness, highest level of EEG coherence. And we have seen that in many studies so far. And because of all these, Atma is said to be imperishable. Okay, so that is the end of fourth shloka. And now, any questions, please? Comments, appealing points, anything anybody wants to say? No? We still have more time. Should we go on to the chanting or go on to the next shloka? We can do one more shloka. Anita ji is always ready to read. Let's
Okay.
ever ready. She is ever ready. Let's do the next shloka. Huh? What's that? Did Pooja say something?
Yes, Himaji.
Yes, Pooja, go ahead.
There was a line you said
There is a line.
about,
Huh.
about the sannyasa and the feeling, mixed feeling. Could you
Sannyasa,
elaborate more? Yes.
sannyasa and what?
A mixed feeling of that this whole world is Maya and like this.
That is in earlier verses. That point came up. So in second chapter, we learned about transcending and we experienced the silence inside. And in third chapter, we learned about karma yoga, how when you come out of transcendence and you are performing actions in the relative field, you bring that silence into the activity and the whole relative life becomes divine. So that is the best advantage of karma yoga. It brings the inner divinity into the activity. So everything looks divine to you. And that is the definition of karma yoga. You have silence and you're still acting. So you have both. That is when you come out into activity. And then as you grow in consciousness, this silence is experienced in your waking state, dreaming state, and sleep state. And in that state, some people tell you that they are witnessing sleep. They're sleeping, but it seems like they're not sleeping. That's because there is separation between self and activity. So when you transcend, what's happening? You're going beyond thought. You are going completely beyond the relative. Finest relative also you're transcending. So you experience Atma separately, the silence of Atma. And the activity is out there somewhere. Say like you go to a movie. You're sitting in your chair and you're watching the movie that is 6 to 10 feet away from you. So it's separate from you. And yourself is separate, the activity is separate. So because that separation is there, we experience that non-attachment from all the actions of the relative field. So you're not attached to the outside world. So because you're separate, then you're thinking, what is going on here? Why I'm feeling like I'm aloof? I'm not one with everything. I'm not mixing. I'm feeling separate. And so at some point, sometimes some people may experience a little bit of confusion. So Maharishi keeps saying life is full, fullness and fullness. I don't feel that fullness. I feel separate like that. So that is only a passing phase. And as we grow in consciousness, that fullness is experienced even in the activity, and then that aloofness is not there. So you feel integrated. That is full infusion of being. The value of being, it is infused into activity. You see, everything in terms of fullness of Atma. So one passes through that phase, and that's what we are going to learn in depth in chapter 4. Okay, Pooja?
Yes, Himaji. But how was that feeling that you are there in everything and every activity, and there are some boundaries which not letting you do the way your heart feels, and you want to get unbounded, like flowing like a river, but there are some obstacle comes which is bounding you not to flow.
Right. That happens on the path. The obstacles will be there. The boundaries are still there. And then as we grow in consciousness, you are going beyond boundaries and you experience that boundless, even in activity, in everything you do, you experience the unbounded. At that point, what happens is you are aware the boundaries, they don't completely disappear. They're there, but you don't feel bound by them. The boundaries become secondary. You are looking at the big picture. You're not caught up with the small things on the screen. So that ability to look at the big picture will stay with you all the time. That comes in higher states of consciousness. So on the big picture, they may dot here, a dot there and all that. They're there. They don't disappear completely. That's what Maharishi said. But they become secondary. Whereas in ignorance or when they're on the path, we are caught up. There is a small dot, we make a big deal out of it. Because you're caught up in that boundary. But when you grow in consciousness, that little thing, that boundary is there. It doesn't bother you. That's the value. The problems may be there, the situations may be there. And that happens because even though you are enlightened, the people around you are not enlightened. So that will become a problem. So that's what you are referring to. But, at this point, we have no control over them. We keep telling them, do meditation, like that. But they don't, and you cannot make them do it. So that problem is encountered. So until everybody is enlightened, that situation will be there. So that's what we learn to deal with imperfections around us. The problems may be there, but they don't bother you. That is the beauty of this technique of transcendental meditation. One can live happily in spite of having problems. Isn't that wonderful? Because you cannot get rid of all the problems. Impossible.
Yeah.
So that experience comes as we grow. Until then, we have to be patient and then continue with our program.
And you just said in this shloka that answer well, but I need to wait for others to be enlightened. And one thing you just said that I am Atma Brahm. And today I have heard a lecture of Maharishi, the difference between God, Brahma and Brahman. So there he said Brahman who is experience Brahm in him. So, or God in him. Brahma is the creator, that is different. But Brahm is the God. It's beyond the God, he says, is more than the God. And the one who experienced Brahm or having Brahm inside, I couldn't get the word to explain. Jo कहते हैं, realize the Brahm. That is Brahman. So, how we get to know we are realizing the Brahman?
First of all, we need to understand what Brahman is. So, Brahman is the coexistence of opposite values of infinite dynamism and infinite silence. That is Brahman. So, when Atma blossoms into Brahman, you have both values there. Infinite silence of Shiva is there and infinite dynamism of Shakti is there. That is Brahman, highest level of consciousness. And you experience that divinity. I am Atma Brahma. That Atma is Brahma. Not the Atma. When you transcend, you only have silence there. There is no activity. So when you begin to experience that dynamism, that in that silence, and dynamism is opposite to silence. When there is silence, there can't be dynamism. When there is dynamism, there cannot be silence. But there is a state of consciousness where both silence and dynamism are held together, even though they are opposite values. That is Brahmi Chetana, ultimate, the highest level of consciousness. So our goal is to move towards that, and we are moving towards that. And in that state, you experience all that divinity, and you don't doubt it. You know the experience. Say like you're passing through a tunnel, which is dark, and eventually you come out of the tunnel and you are in this bright sunshine. You know it is sunshine. Do you ask somebody, is it sunshine? Am I sitting in sunshine? You don't ask anybody. You know that. So when you reach Brahmi Chetana, you know it. You don't doubt it anymore. So if there is doubt, that means maybe you're still on the path. You need to do, more meditation. So that's what we all are moving. And very fortunately, we'll be there. Yeah.
People used to take sannyasis definition very wrong. Okay. So they
Right.
say, they
That-
think that sannyasis
Right.
are not
Yes.
doing it, and they are just sitting and doing nothing. But the sannyasis I experienced or I appreciate is like Maharishi, some of our leaders. But one common thing is that they have left the family. Like I won't name any particular leader, but we saw their work, and we have seen that they have done so much for everyone, and they are still very simple and very in their food, in their living, in their way of living, in their thoughts, their higher thoughts and simple life. So how we can balance both? Like people are used to take sannyasis, those who are different, because they are grhasta and they are not grhasta, and that's why they value them more. Or a grahastha can also be a way of living in sannyas and
Yeah.
doing thing for everyone.
Yeah. That's what Maharishi had been saying, and we we are going to read more about it in the future chapters also. Transcending is common for both householder, grihastha, and for sannyasi, one who is on jnana yoga jnani. So after they transcend, grihastha, householder, will do his job or school or whatever, and the sannyasa, they study scriptures and they do intellectual work. So that is our tradition, and they both are progressing. But some people who misunderstand what sannyasa is, they think, you don't have to do anything. You have to be non-action. That when you transcend, you experience non-action. That is the only way you experience silence and non-action. But they take the literal meaning of non-action, meaning not working, not doing anything. You just sit around. That will only increase dullness. We have studied that in detail in the last chapter very clearly. Naishkarmya, it is called. No karma means only in transcendence. Because you transcend, there is no action there. But people misunderstand. And that's why, to clear misunderstandings, Maharishi brought this beautiful commentary out. So we should stop now, Puja, because we have to do recitation and group meditation. Okay? Are your doubts clear?
Thank you, Imaji.
Okay. What's that? Huh?
Little bit it's clear.
Little bit. Yeah. So on the path, these questions keep coming up. Like Arjuna keeps asking till the last chapter, he keeps asking. So we are on the right path in asking questions also. Okay. Very good. Now, Ghanshyamji, Not Ghanshyamji. We will do few minutes group meditation, and then we will have a fourth chapter recitation by Pandit Ghanshyam. Let's sit comfortably and do a few minutes meditation. Let's close our eyes. Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev. Let's open the eyes. Now we will have Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, recitation by Pandit Ghanshyam ji. Ghanshyam ji, चौथा अध्याय का पारायण करना प्लीज.
जी दीदी.
हाँ.
जी दीदी. जय गुरुदेव. ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणेन मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुशं ददामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति देवैस्तवैर्वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैर्गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तं न विदुः सुरासुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमः. ॐ श्री परमात्मने नमः. अथ चतुर्थोऽध्यायः. श्रीभगवानुवाच इमं विवस्वते योगं प्रोक्तवानहमव्ययम् विवस्वान्मनवे प्राह मनुरिक्ष्वा कविब्रवीत् एवं परम्परा प्राप्तिम् इमं राजर्षयो विदुः सकाले नेह महता योगो नष्टः परन्तप स एवायं मया तेज्या योगः प्रोक्तः पुरातनः भक्तोऽसि मे सखा चेति रहस्यं ह्येतदुत्तमम्. अर्जुन उवाच अपरं भवतो जन्म परं जन्म विवस्वतः कथमेतद्विजानीयां त्वमादौ प्रोक्तवानिति. श्रीभगवानुवाच बहूनि मे व्यतीतानि जन्मानि तव चार्जुन तान्यहं वेद सर्वाणि न त्वं वेत्थ परं तप अजोऽपि सन्नव्यात्मा भूतानामीश्वरोऽपि सन् प्रकृतिं स्वामधिष्ठाय सम्भवाम्यात्ममायया यदा यदा हि धर्मस्य ग्लानिर्भवति भारत अभ्युत्थानमधर्मस्य तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहम् परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृताम् धर्म संस्थापनार्थाय संभवामि युगे युगे जन्म कर्म च मे दिव्यम् एवं यो वेत्ति तत्त्वतः त्यक्त्वा देहं पुनर्जन्म नेति मामेति सोऽर्जुन वीतरागभयक्रोधा मन्मया मामुपाश्रिताः बहवो ज्ञानतपसा पूता मद्भावमागताः ये यथा मां प्रपद्यन्ते तां तथैव भजाम्यहम् मम वर्तमानुवर्तन्ते मनुष्याः पार्थ सर्वशः काङ्क्षतः कर्मणां सिद्धिं यजन्ति यः देवताः क्षिप्रं हि मानुषे लोके सिद्धिर्भवति कर्मजा चातुर्वर्ण्यं मया सृष्टं गुणकर्म विभागशः तस्य कर्तारमपि मां विद्यकर्तारमव्ययम् न मां कर्माणि लिम्पन्ति न मे कर्मफलेष्वः इति मां योऽभिजानाति कर्मभिर्न स बध्यते एवं ज्ञात्वा कृतं कर्म पूर्वैरपि मुमुक्षुभिः कुरु कर्मैव तस्मात् त्वं पूर्वै पूर्वतरं कृतं किं कर्मेति कवयोऽप्यत्र मोहिताः तत्ते कर्म प्रवक्ष्यामि यज्ञात्वा मोक्ष्यसे शुभात् कर्मणो ह्यपि बोधव्यं च विकर्मणः अकर्मणश्च बोधव्यं गहना कर्मणो गतिः कर्मण्यकर्म या पश्येत् अकर्मणि च कर्म यः स बुद्धिमान् मनुष्येषु स युक्तः कृष्णकर्मकृत् यस्य सर्वेषामारम्भाः कामसङ्कल्पवर्जिताः ज्ञानाग्निदग्धकर्माणं तमाहुः पण्डितं बुधाः त्यक्त्वा कर्मफलाशङ्कं नित्यतृप्तो निराश्रयः कर्मण्यभिप्रवृत्तोऽपि नैव किञ्चित् करोति सः निराशीर्यत चित्तात्मा त्यक्तसर्वपरिग्रहः शारीरं केवलं कर्म कुर्वान्नाप्नोति किल्बिषम् यदच्छालाभसन्तुष्टो द्वन्द्वातीतो विमत्सरः समः सिद्धावसिद्धौ च कृत्वापि न निबध्यते गतसङ्गस्य मुक्तस्य ज्ञानावस्थितचेतसः यज्ञायाचरतः कर्म समग्रं प्रबलीयते ब्रह्मार्पणं ब्रह्म हविर्ब्रह्माग्नौ ब्रह्मणाहुतं ब्रह्मैव तेन गन्तव्यं ब्रह्म कर्म समाधिना देवमेवापरे यज्ञं योगिनः पर्युपासते ब्रह्माज्ञावपरे यज्ञं यज्ञेनेवोपजुह्वति श्रोत्रादीनिन्द्रियाण्यन्ये संयमाग्निषु शब्दादीन् विषयान्यन्या इन्द्रियाग्निषु जुह्वसि सर्वाणीन्द्रियकर्माणि प्राणकर्माणि चापरे आत्मसंयमयोगाग्नौ जुह्वति ज्ञानदीपिते यज्ञयज्ञास्तपो यज्ञा योगयज्ञास्तथा परे स्वाध्यायज्ञानयज्ञाश्च यतयः संसितव्रतः अपाने जुह्वति प्राणं प्राणे पानं तथा परे प्राणापानगतिरुद्ध्वा प्राणायामपरा अपरे नियताहारा प्राणान् प्राणेषु जुह्वति सर्वेप्येते यज्ञविदो यज्ञक्षपति कल्मषाः यज्ञशिष्टामृतभुजो यान्ति ब्रह्म सनातनम् नायं लोकोऽस्त्य यज्ञस्य कृतोऽन्यः पुरुषोत्तमा एवं बहुविधा यज्ञा वितता ब्रह्मणो मुखे कर्मजान् विद्धितान् सर्वान् एवं ज्ञात्वा विमुक्ष्यसे श्रेयान् द्रव्यमया यज्ञास्ज्ञानयज्ञः परन्तप सर्वं कर्माखिलं पार्थ ज्ञाने परिसमाप्यते तद्विद्धि प्रणिपातेन परिप्रश्नेन सेवया उपदिच्छन्ति ते ज्ञानं ज्ञानिनस्तत्त्वदर्शिनः यज्ञात्वा न पुनर्मोहम् एवं यास्यसि पाण्डव येन भूतान्यशेषेण द्रक्ष्यस्यात्मन्यथो मयि अपि चेदसि पापेभ्यः सर्वेभ्यः पापकृत्तमः सर्वं ज्ञानप्लवेनैव व्रजिनं सन्तरिष्यसि यतेधांसि समिद्धोऽग्निर्भस्मसात् कुरुतेऽर्जुन ज्ञानाग्निः सर्वकर्माणि भस्मसात् कुरुते तथा न हि ज्ञानेन सदृशं पवित्रमिह विद्यते तत्त्वयं योगसंसिद्धः कालेनात्मनि विन्दति श्रद्धावान् लभते ज्ञानं तत्परः संयतेन्द्रियः ज्ञानं लब्ध्वा परां शान्तिम् अचिरेणाधिगच्छति अज्ञाश्च श्रद्धदानश्च संशयात्मा विनश्यति नायं लोकोऽस्ति न परो न सुखं संशयात्मनः योगसन्न्यस्तकर्माणं ज्ञानसच्छिन्न संशयम् आत्मवन्तं न कर्माणि निर्बध्नन्ति धनञ्जय तस्माद् ज्ञानसम्भूतं धृतस्थं ज्ञानासीनात्मनः चित्त्वैनं संशयं योगम् आतिष्ठोत्तिष्ठ भारत ॐ तत्सदिति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां अध्यायम् योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे ज्ञानकर्मसन्न्यासयोगो नाम चतुर्थोऽध्यायः। ॐ श्रीकृष्णार्पणमस्तु। जय गुरुदेव।
Thank you, Ghanshyamji. Now, let us all come on cameras and say Jai Gurudev to Maharishi. Thank you all for joining.
Jai Gurudev Maji.
Jai Gurudev Maji.
Jai Gurudev, Sunita, Padma, Bindu, Anita ji for reading. Usha is there. Vaishali, thank you for joining. Vaishali is our new administrative assistant. She'll be with us in future programs to help us with our technical issues, muting, unmuting, and all those things which I was doing. Now I don't have to do that anymore. Thank you, Vaishali, for joining. Oh, Amarun joined.
Thank you so
Nice
much
to
for
see you,
giving me
Amarun.
opportunity. Jai Gurudev, Jai Gurudev,
Jai
Gurudev.
Gurudev.
Jai
Bella,
Gurudev Heavenji.
Jai
Jai
Gurudev
Gurudev.
Hemaji. Thank for the answers.
oh, you're welcome. What did you say, Amarun?
I said Jai Gurudev, it was beautiful. I love the invocation, how he sang it, how the Pandit Ghanshyamji did the invocation. It was so beautiful, so smooth, so divine.
Yes.
Thank you, Hemaji, the Hema Devi. Jai
You're
Gurudev.
welcome. It's all Guru Krupa, Maharishi's grace and blessings. We are all getting together and reading Gita commentary. It's so beautiful. Thank you, Anne and Bella and as Happy Girl for joining. And we'll meet again next week, same time. Jai Gurudev. Usha is
जय
there.
गुरुदेव।
Jai
जय
Gurudev.
गुरुदेव।
Jai Gurudev, Usha. Jai Gurudev, Bella. Jai Gurudev. Now, Vaishali,
Jai
you are
Gurudev.
in the meeting now.
I'm happy.
Himaji, you are a host.
Sachin, what did you say?
Himaji, you are a host. You can end now.
Oh, okay. Sachin, I didn't see the link for ramrajtv connection. Give it to Vaishali and Vaishali put it in all the 3 groups, please.
Yes, sir, sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jai Gurudev.
जय गुरुदेव।